He's speaking from a position of weakness, and you can't negotiate from a position of weakness. I mean, he likes to pretend that he's the great deal maker. He's gone into this from a position of weakness.
Well, let's talk now to former NATO Deputy Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, General Sir Richard Shirreff. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Callum. Good to be with you.
It's really good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us. I suppose I want to start with the principle of a joint ceasefire, and the introduction of the proposal from the US and Ukraine, which it felt at that point turned the tables on Putin. So he had to then navigate the tension between his own ambition for a decisive victory in Ukraine and his efforts to maintain a close relationship with President Trump. Where do we stand on that now?
Well, Prime Minister Starmer is absolutely right that Trump is being played by Putin. And for all the puffed up arrogance of President Trump, he is really naive. He doesn't understand that peace is not in Putin's interest. Putin wants all of Ukraine. He wants to achieve his maximalist aims. He's given absolutely nothing away at the moment. And he's going to go on. He might at some stage agree to a short cessation of hostilities, but we have to assume he will break it and that he will continue until he achieves his aims. And meanwhile, of course, Ukraine is absolutely right to have its red lines. So I think Trump is actually caught between a rock and a hard place here.
Yes, well, which is fascinating because obviously he's gone into this thing as the man who has brought progress towards peace insofar as there wasn't any that was obvious before now. You know, now the conversation is absolutely well and truly active. So has Trump backed himself into a corner? Is there any sort of diplomatic winner or loser at this point?
He has absolutely backed himself into a corner, and he's speaking from a position of weakness, and you can't negotiate from a position of weakness. I mean, he likes to pretend that he's the great deal maker. He's gone into this from a position of weakness. The only way he could move into a position of strength is to put Ukraine in the driving seat, put Ukraine in the position of strength by inflicting defeat on Russia. But it's probably too late for that now.
So there's no way for a negotiation at this point to come from an American position of strength?
The only position of strength that America would have, as I say, is if they had put together a strategy, together with their European and other Western allies, to give Ukraine the means to defeat Russia, to absolutely inflict defeat. And the only way that Russia is going to accept some sort of peace is if they are stopped and given a serious bloody nose. The only way you're going to get a peacekeeping force in there is to force it on Russia, because Russia's already said we're not prepared to accept Western peacekeepers.
So what you're arguing for, if I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a show of force, some sort of military, a decisive aggression right now to stick it, frankly, to Putin and to Russia and to prove a point. Is that fair to say?
In so many words, exactly that. It's saying to Putin, right, you're not prepared to discuss peace, right? We are going to double down. We are going to give Ukraine the means to inflict defeat on you, and we are not going to stop until that's happened.
And would that prolong the war?
Well, it would not. It's not going to be over in a night. Of course, it's not. It's not going to be over in a day. But let's look more strategically. That is the only way that we in Europe, we in the transatlantic region, are going to be able to guarantee peace for generations to come.
Yeah.
If we fail to do this, if we let Putin off the hook, if Putin gets away with a Trump brokered deal which gives him what he wants in Ukraine, you can be sure that he will come back for more. He will come back to finish off Ukraine. He has not given up on his aim of seeing NATO roll back from its pre-97 borders. He wants to establish another Russian empire in Eastern Europe in exactly the same way that Yalta 1945 gave Stalin an empire in Eastern Europe. And that is absolutely going to guarantee that at some stage in the next 2 to 3 years, we will be at war with Russia.
I do find this fascinating because all the talk of the European peacekeeping force, or excuse me, that's probably unfair, the kind of the coalition of the willing, which would include countries not in Europe as well, potentially, is simmering away in the background. And there's something of an irrelevance to it unless there is a ceasefire or agreement in place that includes that. However, it does strike me, General Sir Richard Shirreff, that actually a peacekeeping force of that nature, that would be a potentially unlimited commitment in terms of duration? Because you think that as soon as a peacekeeping force was withdrawn, Russia would simply progress again. And perhaps we're not thinking this all the way through. What is the end of that peacekeeping force commitment?
You are absolutely right. This is a commitment for decades until Russia finally recognizes it is never going to get Ukraine. And we have to, this is all about understanding where Russia is coming from, because deep in the Russian DNA is this sense that Russia cannot be the empire it aspires to be without subjugating Ukraine, without removing Ukraine's sovereignty and security. And the only way, therefore, as I say, we're going to achieve peace is through stopping Russia, defeating Russia, imprinting in their mind the notion that they can never achieve Ukraine, and then putting in place long-term a deterrent presence in Ukraine that makes it impossible for Russia to try it on again.
Yeah. It's really fascinating speaking to you on what is an important day for the so-called coalition of the willing as well. I wonder, just very, very briefly, if I may, what you would consider to be a good outcome from today. Is it a show of force? Could that come today? Should that come today?
Well, I think a good outcome from today would be a recognition that if there is a ceasefire, that any force put in is credible, capable, and more than overmatching anything that the Russians could put up against it.
General Sir Richard Shirreff, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
General Sir Richard Shirreff was NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander for Europe.
Martin's got in touch saying, why are we wasting time on a Western coalition of the willing? We know Russia will never agree to that. Let's stop posturing. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say the posturing might be all we've got right now. Not to distill it too far down, but actually maybe that is all there is. There's a lot of talk in the last 12 hours or so about where the ball is, whose court is the ball in, and actually a lot of that is simply posturing, isn't it?
And maybe it's actually just saying, at the moment, the impression from Trump is very clearly that there is going to be no US security guarantees. So maybe it's sensible for Europe and other willing nations to come up with a plan of how to help secure the security, if that makes sense, of Ukraine if a deal ever comes to fruition. They don't want a vacuum to be there where a deal is agreed and Trump goes, well, that's it. We've got US workers there mining the rare earth minerals, but that's it. There's going to be a real fear there that leaves Ukraine exposed. So that's one argument that I would probably guess Keir Starmer would put forward. Let's
speak to Times reporter Will Lloyd, who joins us from Kyiv. Good morning, Will.
Hey, Callum, hello.
Yeah, good to speak to you this morning. At the start of, I'm trying to manage my expectations, I suppose, of Sir Keir Starmer's summit. There was the Lancaster House summit. There have been ongoing meetings here, there, and everywhere around the world, and I'm trying to determine whether Europe's come up with anything concrete as a result of these summits as of yet.
My understanding is that it would take 10 years of 3.5% defence spending for Europe to independently guarantee Ukraine's security. So I know I always sound like the prophet of doom when I come on here, but that's the situation, and I think it's great that Starmer has taken a lead in diplomacy. Clearly, he's put Britain right in the heart of some of these discussions. Jonathan Powell has shaped Ukraine's approach to these ceasefire talks. But in terms of the world of Ukraine, right, in terms of the world of Sumy Oblast and the Donbass and air defense and trenches and FPV drones, I think that we're quite distant from those realities at the moment, both Britain and France and Germany, and that isn't going to change quickly.
What is the situation in Kyiv, Will? I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Putin is kind of talking the talk, but is certainly continuing to drop bombs across Ukraine.
Hugely, yeah. I mean, yesterday there were 2 ballistic missile strikes on Ukraine, 178 drones flew into Ukraine. In Kyiv yesterday, there was a celebration for something called, I think it's called the National Day of Volunteers. And this is a sort of flag parade that brings central Kyiv to a halt. And again, just in terms of thinking, how long is this war going to go on for? You basically have 600 teenagers carrying flags through the middle of Kyiv, marching around, singing the national anthem, very much wearing ski masks and sunglasses and looking like sort of miniature paramilitaries. And as I was marching down the main street in Kyiv, all the traffic was stopped, and a guy in a car gestured to me because he thought I was one of these teenage paramilitaries, and he sort of gestured for me to come over to him, and he started speaking Ukrainian, saying thank you and all this kind of stuff. And then I said, look, I am just an English journalist, and he said, God bless you, God bless you. Wow. And I think these marches were pretty controversial 10, 12 years ago, because these are right-wing paramilitaries, basically, or trainee right-wing paramilitaries. But the civilians I spoke to were saying things like, these people are our future now. And that gives you a sense of the way things have changed in Ukraine, the public moods, the public attitude towards this war. I think people realize it's a dangerous situation, and anybody who's willing to pick up a gun is quite welcome at the moment.
Wow. That is fascinating. And there is this determination, as you were reporting for us yesterday, of Ukraine to continue to fight, obviously. When you consider what is in the balance here, it's potentially comes down to really Putin not stopping until Ukraine is crushed on the battlefield or forced into submission at the negotiating table in order for him to, well, save face and indeed save territory that he has conquered during this conflict. But Ukraine's very survival is at stake. And actually, we shouldn't lose sight of these things either, that is what is up for discussion at these various summits and things that are taking place.
I think that's certainly the way Ukrainians feel about it. I don't think they see this as like as a game. I mean, this is, are we going to be an independent country in 10 years? I mean, everything comes down to that. What we've seen at the end of the week with Trump's comments about Ukrainian forces being surrounded in Kursk, again, like that situation there has not developed to Ukraine's advantage. I think there was always an end goal in mind there, which was that if Ukraine could take and hold some of this territory in Kursk, it could use it as a bargaining chip in some of the discussions we've seen this week. The Russians have pushed out the Ukrainians. I mean, they've fought a rearguard action. They're going back to positions that I saw this week, which are dug in, lots of trenches and bunkers and tank traps, artillery positions. And so they're going back into their territory. I haven't seen any evidence that they've been surrounded. And this is what's so strange about Trump. You know, he is repeating the kind of talking points that we've seen from Russian propaganda yet again. And I think that adds to what you're talking about, which is the Ukrainian sense of, wow, if we can't rely on America, we really are, you know, we're going to have to do this ourselves. I don't think that means the war's going to end particularly quickly.
Will, thank you ever so much. It's so good to speak to you and get your analysis. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, Callum.
That's Will Lloyd reporting from Kyiv. He's one of the brilliant reporters for the Sunday Times, who's been in Ukraine, as he says, for a couple of weeks now. And by the way, while you're enjoying the free access to thetimes.com over the course of this weekend, when you hear somebody like Will on the radio and you want to catch up on his reporting, one of the best things to do is to just search online for Will Lloyd, The Times, and then his profile page comes up, and under that are all the articles that he has written, and you can enjoy free access at thetimes.com, so you can go back through Will's reporting over however long you want to, really. But that's a good way to navigate to your favourite writers, is to enjoy their profile pages and catch all of their journalism.
You can also do that at thetimes.com just with a search function, can't you?